When I caught a falling DVD case before it hit the ground, a customer said when I initiate my plan to conquer the world, I think I'll have to send 2 super ninjas to kill you instead of just 1. What's the coolest compliment you've ever gotten? I taught English in China and at the end of the semester, a student said, "Next year I want to do 2nd grade over again so that you'll still be my English teacher." He then handed me a pretty good drawing of an AK-47 and other various military paraphernalia, and at the bottom of it said, "Best teacher." This isn't so much of a cool compliment as it is just the best compliment I've ever received. My freshman year of high school, there was this adult that I looked up to a ton. At the end of one of our conversations, he looks up at me and says, "I never wanted to have a son. Until I met you, I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there and looked like an idiot." But it was definitely the best compliment I think anyone could have ever given me. I had something similar after I'd finished my finale performance of Cinderella. The man who played the Baron, Cinderella's father, told me he and his wife had been trying for a child for years but they couldn't conceive. But he said if they were ever to have a daughter he would hope she turned out just like me. I cried a little bit after that. I used to work at Build-A-Bear and I had a dad say to me, "Honey, you could sell crap off a wall." Best compliment I ever got. "You could sell a pig's butt to a rabbi." My 5th grade teacher wrote "You are a fountain of useless information" on my report card. 15 years later, and I go to national trivia championships. I recently had a rather large drunk gentleman stumble up to me, cup my face in his hands, and tell me "You have the hair of a beautiful man." Then he punched me in the chest, said "Frick B," and intoxicatedly staggered off into the night. Similar thing happened to me once. A really drunk dude came up to me and said, "I'm not gay but I love your face. I don't know what it is but I love it." Then he left and I never saw him again. It was the only time anyone had ever said something positive about my looks. When I was about 7, I was doing laser tag at some bowling alley place. I hit some guy with a crazy fluke 50-yard grenade shot. He was like, "Oh for frick's sake." The grown-up guy next to me was like, "Good shot bro." I was so happy I nearly cried. Whenever I find myself playing with participating in activities with younger kids, I always try to compliment them if they do something well. I remember how cool it felt to have a grown-up acknowledge my achievements when I was a kid. About 7 years ago, I was sitting with my boss in my annual review. He looked at my productivity numbers a moment, then looked up at me, then looked at my numbers, and finally he said, "You're deceptively efficient." He went on to explain that it always looks like I'm chatting with my co-workers, laughing at something, telling someone a joke, etc. But at the end of the week, there is all of this work done. Ever since then, when I do something right and someone compliments me on it or remarks about it, I'll just shrug and say, "Well, I've been told I'm deceptively efficient." It's cool your boss realized it's okay to let efficient and productive workers slack. Often having the freedom to laugh at a joke or chat with co-workers and not look busy makes for a much more productive workplace. You're the most talented one out of the lot of them, and if you don't keep up your skills, I will hunt you down and kill you. The most inspirational words my music composition professor said to me. I, a male, was walking in a mall with a friend, a female. I'm looking another direction when all of a sudden a guy creeps in from behind, no biggie, and starts talking to her. Guy, "Hey, is your friend gay?" Her, "No." Guy, "Oh, well he's disturbingly beautiful." She told me a few minutes later. I smiled. Over 10 years later and I still remember it. When I used to be a waiter, I was carrying 2 drinks back to a table. Suddenly I drop one but catch it before it hits the ground and half the restaurant applauds. Kept getting high fives from my tables. I did something very similar. I was carrying a plate with a burger and fries and 2 little bowls of ketchup aioli on it too. I slipped and everything went in the air. I Peter Parker read that crap and just continued on my work. About a minute later, a table, not even mine, handed me a $10 and said that was better than the circus. In high school I once convinced my entire homeroom class, 20 people, to skip class. Then I went to class. The teacher knew it was my doing without question and proceeded to tell me that I would give Hitler's charisma a run for its money. Then I got suspended for a day for causing unrest. I am cracking up at the thought of a kid taking home a discipline slip with a reason listed as causing unrest. Also, for me, I don't think the major thing is what is said, but rather who it is said by. One of my favorites is when my history teacher, who was a cruel, heartless man who endeavored to make my life a misery, said, "Well done. I didn't expect that from you." Yeah, it was a great moment when a sergeant in my platoon who never said anything good to anyone once nodded to me while he said, "Good job." If anyone else said it, it wouldn't really mean a lot, but coming from him, it made my month when I was in the army. I have a pretty big nose. A sea kid told me I have a really great nose. I'm sure he was thinking about how much sea he could snort if he had my nose, but still, swoon. I've had junkies crowd round my veins in admiration. It was nice, I guess. You are unfit to be a commander and unfit to be commanded. I would never want you around my family, nor would I trust you to watch my dog. Yet you are the only one who did not disappoint me out there today. My platoon commander, after keeping up radio communications of our entire company, directing the mortar fire and calling in US medevac while running into an ambush in the outskirts of Kunduz. I was in the rank of a PFC and disciplinary action were taken against me afterwards since I disobeyed orders. I want more information. Dang it, them pants is crazy. You doing ITN? You doing IT? Comma disheveled dude in NYC. My pants were kinda crazy, to be honest. Weird phase. I dapped dude and went on my way. Pics of them crazy pants. My friend cracked me up when she met my 81-year-old grandfather and with a completely straight face goes, "My god, I can see where your grandchild gets her good looks." My grandpa had no idea what to say. My aunt by marriage, who is one of the kindest, nicest, most thoughtful people in the world, raised 3 boys who are the coolest, funniest, most awesome guys I've ever met. I have a very troubled relationship with my parents. Her husband's brother is my dad, and after having a child of my own, things got extremely weird and tense. I essentially have no contact with either of my parents anymore. A few months ago, when I was over at my aunt's house for dinner and my daughter was with us, she told me she was really proud of how I turned out and that I was a great mom. It made me cry. I was childless by choice for many years because I was afraid I would end up fricking up my kid because my parents are so fricked up. That's my very same fear about having children. I'm not in the best place for having children right now anyways, but still, I kind of like the idea of having a family someday, but when the time comes I don't know if I will ever want to, because I really don't want to bring someone into this world just to frick up his/her life. Congratulations on being a good mom. I was in an elevator once, with my hair tied back, and there was this girl in the corner who sort of glanced over at me time and time again in a strange manner. When I was just about to leave the elevator, she pointed at me and said, "Legolas." I think she mistook me for Orlando Bloom. You're the prettiest princess I've ever met. Spoken by a 5-year-old girl in a Chinese restaurant. Backstory: I'm a girl and I was at a convention cosplaying. I spent the entire meal playing princess with her while my friends ate. I was at a Rinfest, and instead of dressing in costume, I spiked up my 2-foot-tall black mohawk. One of the characters, a noble lady, I think, approached me and told me, "Good sir, I'm sure if you apologize, the fairy will turn it back." To this day I am not sure if she was trying to compliment me, but couldn't break character, or calling my mohawk gay. Haha, she was just cracking a hilarious joke, which was hilarious. After a particularly effective night, it's like the Energizer Bunny learned the Kama Sutra. I keep that as my motivation. I like that you chose effective as the best descriptor of your evening. Understated, yet, I'm sure, quite accurate. I was told by a guy once that I would make a great bearded lady. I carry that tender compliment with me as a torch in dark times. Back in my dating days I was having sex with a girl for the first time and she started screaming about how I was better than her vibrator. That, my friends, was a nice compliment. My ex threw her vibrator away completely unprompted after she started dating me because she said I was better than it and she didn't need it. I hope she misses us both now we broke up. One time I was on a ferry from the Greek island Hydra back to Athens and I was getting strange looks from some random older Greek lady and her daughter that were sitting across from me. Finally, the older lady starts talking to me in Greek. Her daughter translated, she says that you look like Alexander the Great. It's hard not to feel like a badass when a stranger compares you to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had muscle spasms, seizures, and 2 lazy eyes. I was on a first date with a girl and we had a long, Ryan Gosling and Drive-esque pause in conversation over dinner where we just stared into each other's eyes for about 30 seconds. She finally broke the silence by laughing and saying, "How can I resist those bedroom eyes?" A few hours later, it turned out she couldn't. I saw one of my friends for the first time in a few months after I started going to the gym and she said, "Wow, you look so healthy." Seemed really genuine and it was a nice thing to hear. I googled my name last year to see what would come up. I'm the only person on Facebook with my name, so I decided to see what the rest of the internet had in store for my name. The first link was Facebook, obviously. The second, some fake site that just steals your info to make a profile. And the third link down was to a blog with the quote, "I did some very good thinking tonight. I believe that my name has got to be the coolest kid and will always be the coolest kid I will ever meet." I read the blog, and it was written by one of my best childhood friends in 2005, about a year after I moved across the country before the beginning of high school. I'm a 21-year-old guy, and I cried that night, and I never cry. I'm going to name my first child Ethan. I feel like a stalker now, Rick Lobster. When I was in my junior year of high school I played percussion in band. My teacher knew that I was a stronger player, but he didn't know that I had been taking drums at lessons for about a year from this insanely talented local German beast of man who named Wilhelm, because there typically is no drums at in-concert band. He happened to pick a fun medley of classic rock tunes near the end of the year, however, and it called for a drums at part. The senior percussionist, who everyone knew could play set, was out sick. So the day before I had taken the music home and ran through it a few times. I got on the drums at the next day. The band director gave me that not bad face and seemed a little surprised. I hit every single cue and fill. The band director became dead silent when it was finished. Everyone was looking over at me and one of the freshman percussionists was like, "Dude." He walked from the podium to the back with this weird look on his face. I actually thought he was angry for a second and my hands were shaking from the adrenaline of having just played the drums at in front of so many people for the first time. When he got over to me he held his hand out and I handed him my drumsticks out of confusion. He put them aside, reached over and shook my hand. "Young lad, I'm gonna kick your butt," he whispered to me. "Why aren't you in jazz band? I didn't know you could play like that." He walked back to the front shaking his head saying, "He hit every part perfect." I was pretty much on clouds for the rest of the day. The next year I did join the jazz band and I was voted by my peers as the strongest senior player and received the Louis Armstrong Award, which my older had received 4 years before and my younger brother just got this year. A woman offered me coffee and said, "Black." I assume I said yes. "How'd you know?" And she replied, "You just strike me as a no balls kind of guy." I've walked a bit taller ever since. In high school I had bright blue curly hair and dressed like a cartoon character, bright skirts and tights and leg warmers and a frick ton of plastic jewelry. Walking through a department store one day, a little girl, maybe 4 or 5, looked at me, awestruck, then turned to her mom and kid whispered, Mom, that girl's a rock star." I think that alone outweighed all the rude and nasty comments I got over the years. Kid knew what was up. It was very difficult to find a job this summer, and I finally got an interview for a nanny position, with the 2 children present. The mother called me the next day and told me I got the job even after interviewing other girls because her son thought I seemed like the kind of person who liked having adventures. Frick yeah. When I hurt my hip at a track meet, I went in to see my doctor. I got an x-ray done, and the doctor came back with the results. He told me, "Son, it seems your thigh muscles are too strong for your bones. They're pulling your hip apart." Turns out I had a floating bone in my other hip, which had already been previously pulled off. He said again, "You've got some pretty goddamn strong thigh muscles." From a teacher, "You can do the stuff in your sleep. Literally, I slept through her class every day and did better than anyone in it. In high school, my teacher got mad at me every day for sleeping. As soon as I aced a test and got the highest grade in class, she allowed me, and me alone, to sleep whenever I wanted in her class. Oh, the glory days. Not particularly interesting, but mine was, are you left or right footed, as in playing football, soccer. Up until I was 16 I wouldn't use my left at all. Over one summer worked on it and that was the result. Pretty proud. That could go both ways depending how the question was asked. It's either you're so terrible with either foot I can't tell which one is dominant, or you're so good with either foot I can't tell which one is dominant. 2 years ago, I finally went sub 2 o'clock in the 800 with a 1:58.9. When I finished my coach said, well, that didn't suck. Breaking 2 minutes by that much is huge. My school had 5+ guys break 2 with a 1:59.9. Just recently we've had kids running 1:57 and that's flying. Congrats. A few nights ago, my boyfriend and I were holding hands and skipping across Harvard Bridge. An old, Eastern European man yelled, "You look like the Wizard of Oz," as he whizzed past on his bike. We felt super cool. I have, on 2 different occasions, been told that I am perspicacious. Once by a boss, and another time by a stranger on the internet. I love that word, and I love the very specific compliment. Perspicacious, having keen mental perception and understanding. Discerning. More perspicacious neighbors, the Paulsons among them, suspected that Joey also enjoyed being the smartest person in the house. Jonathan Franzen. Freedom. My high school physics teacher and I had a tumultuous relationship. She had a PhD in biology, don't ask, and, quite frankly, I understood algebra-based physics better than she did. From her point of view, all I did in her class was talk, but I spent the vast majority of my time explaining her nonsense to other students. One day I was explaining an overhead to a couple of my classmates behind me, when my teacher called me out, my name. "If you think you understand this material, why don't you come up here and explain it?" I got up out of my chair, stood at the front of the class, and explained the overhead. I forget what it was on now. I fielded questions and after a few minutes everyone understood. My teacher, very upset by this point, told me to go back to my seat. She looked at me as I took my seat, with some swagger, I might add, and said to me, "You are like a splinter in my eye that I can't get out no matter what I do." Best compliment ever. I was never really good at basketball, but liked to shoot baskets with friends. One day, when I was about 16, I went to the park but saw it was full of guys in their 20s playing pickup games. I figured I might as well play and got in the next round. The first time I got the ball, I dribbled to the basket, started to trip over my own legs, and heaved up a shot, falling down with my left hand that went in. This 6 feet 4 inches black guy all of a sudden exclaimed, "Dumb, we got a Dwayne Wade here, I'm Asian." I was walking through Washington Square Park, NYC, one day late at night and some creepy guy told me to bend over for him. Keep in mind I was a 13-year-old boy, but I was honestly really flattered. I mean, he was admiring my figure. I didn't get too many girls at the time so I was pretty honored. He then chased after me trying to sell me drugs, but I choose to remember the better parts. Don't accept any more of those compliments. For your own good. Your face looks as if it was carved by a man attempting to sit on a pineapple naked while being sucked off by God. Not sure if I should be offended. I shall have to ask my brother's girlfriend to elaborate. I feel like there was alcohol involved here, or shrooms. You are the chosen one. It has been prophesied. You just don't know it yet. Still haven't figured it out, incidentally. See? Doesn't he sound like John Kennedy? I've lived in KYNTN my whole life, but to some woman and her 8-year-old son I sound like a president from Massachusetts. That makes no fricking sense. Everyone knows that the more ninjas you encounter, the less powerful each individual ninja is. How has no one pointed this out yet? She is way hotter than me, smart and basically amazing. She said I do. D. So I was naked and handcuffed spread eagle to this cross and this gal's using me to demonstrate how to use a bullwhip on someone. She pops me on the shoulders a few times, then moves downward and says unclench your butt. I hesitated to argue. The woman had a bullwhip, so she repeated herself. I said I'm not clenching. She said really. I clenched demonstratively and she said, oh, okay, whoa, nice, and patted my butt approvingly. It's not much, but it's the only compliment I ever received on my butt. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.